Hi, I'm Jacqueline Rinksmeyer, Executive Director of the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today to watch our annual Candidates Forum. We do this event in partnership with Medina TV, and I'm here today with General Manager Jared Fry.
Thank you, Jacqueline. You will notice today, as Jacqueline and I do not have our mask on, and as I interview these candidates, I will not be wearing a mask, nor will the candidates. We are following all the Department of Health guidelines in regards to spatial distancing, and with being on air and doing a broadcast, masks are not required.
All candidates in local contested races were invited to participate in these interviews. This forum is designed to inform the voting public of their choices in the upcoming election.
The views and opinions stated by the candidates during the course of these interviews are not necessarily those of Medina TV and the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for exercising your right to vote in the upcoming election. Enjoy the Candidates Forum.
Joining us now in studio is Aaron Godfrey, the candidate for the Ohio 16th Congressional District. So Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you first start off and just tell the voters a little bit about yourself.
So again, my name is Aaron Godfrey. I'll appear on the ballot as Aaron Paul Godfrey. I am a 34-year-old physicist. I grew up in Elyria, Ohio. I've been around the state a little bit, but I came back to live in Westlake now, which is the furthest corner of this district you can get. The 16th district, if you're not familiar with it, starts in Westlake, Ohio, which is a western suburb of Cleveland, snakes all the way down through parts of Medina County, including Medina itself, all of Wayne County, and parts of Portage, Summit, and Stark. So it's a big district, a lot of people in it, and I think that my kind of background, my life story is kind of emblematic of the people of Ohio and this district, where I'll tell you that the main reason I'm running is when I was a teenager, my dad was diagnosed with diabetes, and we were a working class family. We were living paycheck to paycheck, and we couldn't afford the insulin most of the time. So he wound up having to ration what he could get. And no one should have to be in that position where they have to either choose between medicine or food on the table and a roof over their kids' heads. But that was effectively the story of my teenage years. But, you know, my dad lived his life to be a dad. That's all he wanted to do. He had 3 kids, including myself. I have a younger sister and an older brother. And, you know, as far as that goes, he did a pretty good job. I don't want to brag, but I am a physicist now. I work in the aerospace industry up in Middleburg Heights. And you know, I'm running partially because of what happened to him, though. No one should be in that position. And it's like many other issues facing this district and this state today, there's still very much on the top of voters' minds, even now, 15 years later after my dad was diagnosed. More than 15 years, really. So I'll just, I guess, sum up and let you get to your next question. But I may be a physicist now, but I'm from a working class family and a first-generation college graduate, just trying to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Thanks for taking part in the process, then. Explain the role of a congressman for those people that may not know.
So those who are familiar with the structure of our government, there's the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch. This is part of the legislative branch. It's part of the 2 bicameral legislation where the U.S. House is responsible for a lot of things. Most important among them is the power of oversight and the power of the purse is what they call it. So the U.S. House gets to basically set the budget for the nation, and that means that they get to direct funds to and away from their district for whatever cause they feel fit the needs of the district. And I think that a big part of the role that we've been missing across the government the last few years is oversight, and it's something that I am particularly interested in, and I don't think that the incumbent takes very seriously. Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the working relationship right now, what's kind of your opinion of the relationship between the Senate, House, President? How are all these working together?
I would say probably not very well. And I think that has led to a lot of the frustration people get in this country right now, and why politics is so divisive and hyper-partisan right now is because everybody's been polarized into their camps. And I think that so gerrymandering is a big problem in Ohio, and this might seem like a tangent, but I have somewhere I'm going with this, I promise. But in Ohio, the districts are drawn so that no district is considered competitive by normal standards, and this district is included, and so is the 7th district, and the 9th district, and the 11th district, which are all nearby, but they're also districts where you haven't seen a new congressman in ages. This district is actually unique because we have a first-term incumbent. But the reason this is relevant is because when you have districts that are drawn this way, where you're not considered in a normal year competitive, then the only challenge you get is from the extreme side of your party. So in the Republican Party, you get more and more right-wing people that can win these races because they can win the primary, and in a safe district, they don't really have to worry too much about their competitor on the other side of the aisle. And the same thing goes for the Democratic side, too. If we had districts gerrymandered in our favor, we'd only have to worry about challengers from the left. And so we would become more polarized. And so this has led to this hyper-partisan atmosphere across the entire country and Ohio that just makes it so everybody treats each other like enemies instead of coworkers and colleagues, and it makes compromise almost impossible, and it has just led to the stance that we see where the House passes bill after bill, they don't go anywhere in the Senate, and they don't go anywhere in the White House.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say, if you had to narrow down right now, would probably be the biggest issue that faces this district?
So this is another problem with the gerrymandered districts, is that they're so varied. They're so varied across the entire breadth of it. It's different wherever you go. But I would say that the COVID pandemic, COVID-19, is actually, poll after poll shows that actually cuts across most lines, is that everyone's most worried about that. Mm-hmm. And you know, things like this, where in a normal time we may only be 2 or 3 feet away from us, but now you're clear on the other side of the room. It's on the top of everybody's mind. We want to send our kids back to school. We want to be able to go out with our friends and enjoy ourselves. And all of it's been thrown up by the pandemic and by the way it's been mishandled by the government on a lot of levels, not just the national level, but to some extent the state level too, even though I do think Governor DeWine had, at least when it was most important when this thing first started, he handled it very well.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms, since you brought up the pandemic, I'll kind of follow up on that. Businesses, that's one of the biggest things hit with COVID-19, whether it's the employees of a business that's barely hanging on right now, or a business that's trying to get started. What's kind of your outlook or things you'd like to do to help business?
I think that, so when the first stimulus, and the only stimulus so far, the CARES Act, passed back in March, and included a payment or a paycheck protection program so that small businesses could take out loans from the government to keep their staff on payroll so no one would lose their checks because of this. Mm-hmm. It was a great idea, but it wound up getting abused by a lot of people. Like giant corporations who have plenty of money to spare were getting millions and billions in loans. And these loans were meant for small businesses. The idea was if you keep these people on your payroll using these loans, you don't have to pay them back. Mm-hmm. So it was a great stimulus, a great idea to keep people going and the economy going, even though a lot of people couldn't go to work. I would like to see that program brought back with more protections put into place so that it can't be abused by companies that are bigger than some certain size or have profit margins of some certain amount. Mm-hmm. You know, that'd all be something we have to talk about at the negotiating table. But programs like that help. And one thing I'm really concerned about with the pandemic going forward, and so we've seen a lot of jobs reports that look okay. The one we saw at the beginning of the month for August looked okay, but it came, like the data was taken for that jobs report at the beginning of the month. And at the beginning of that month, a lot of protections for the people who've been suffering from the pandemic expired. And that includes things like the eviction moratorium, the extended unemployment benefits. These are all things that help people who are the most impacted by this a great deal. And with those things expiring, I'm really worried that we're about to fall off a cliff, and that though we look like we've been recovering at a decent pace, I'm really worried it's going to fall off. We're going to see a massive spike in evictions and homelessness, and we have to have a government that's willing to work for the people and hear them out and come to where they are and work for them, because that's the job. Work for them and make sure that we can pass programs that help them and help them get by.
Okay, well, great. You mentioned the programs and working for the people. What would be 3 things, if elected, that you would like to see happen while you were in office?
Well, so the term would begin at the beginning of January of 2021. If the pandemic is still a very big deal at that point, and by all means we should fully expect it to be, I would like to make sure that another stimulus round goes out, and something that's a little more. So to put it in perspective, most people got direct payments of about $1,200. And that went up and down depending on your income. I think that the income scale was fine, but we need something more than that, because $1,200 did not help these families who were laid off at the beginning of March and still haven't found another job, or whose jobs still haven't come back. So the pandemic is still a big deal. I want to make sure that we help people out, provide the stimulus they need to get by, to keep a roof over their head and food on their table. And this kind of leads into healthcare too. Just in the month of July, I believe it was, 5 million people lost their healthcare because it's employer-based. And in the middle of a pandemic, people losing their healthcare, people who might catch COVID-19 and need to go to the doctor, people who might just want to get tested but don't have insurance, so they can't get the test, so they just go about their daily lives spreading the coronavirus. Healthcare has been a problem in this country for a long time. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, it was one of the main reasons I decided to run for office. To lose your healthcare in the middle of a pandemic is a huge failure of our society, and we should do more for them. So while a big part of why I'm running is healthcare in general, and why I would love to push for a program that makes sure everyone is covered, we at least need to care for the people in the pandemic the most. Anyone who lost their job and lost their healthcare as a result of the pandemic should immediately be enrolled in Medicare or something similar to it, to make sure that they can get the care they need and to protect their families, their neighbors, their coworkers, everyone. It just makes sense. Third, past that, there's been a lot of, I know Medina County especially has had a lot of growth, and they've had a lot of infrastructural issues with their growth. And I think that unfortunately part of the last 3 years is that infrastructure week, as the Trump administration would call it, has become a joke, because they always say we're going to talk about infrastructure this week, always gets derailed by something. But that's something that we could really use around here, something that we could use to maintain our roads and our bridges, and in the middle of a pandemic, bring back a lot of really good, well-paying jobs. So those are 3 things I'd like to see. And if you go to my website, godfreyforcongress.com, you can find a long list of issues of where I stand on them, what I believe, and what I'd like to do.
Okay, great. Now, 2 of the other issues that are out there right now, kind of on the front lines, it was social injustice, whether that's the LGBTQ community or the racial injustice that we're seeing today. What are your thoughts on both of those issues, and what would you like to do if elected?
Well, a lot of the unrest we're seeing today comes with good reason. When you look at the statistics of police violence against people of color, and you compare, like I know that some people in the Trump administration like to compare it to, police violence versus white people or whatever other group of demographics they're trying to talk about. But if you look at the statistics, it's very clear that it is a problem specifically with people of color. So it's hard to ignore their complaints and saying that the system isn't working for us. They have every right to be angry at that and to be protesting about it. I think that what we can do as a congressman, what I could do is just make sure that the people who are being affected by these issues have a seat at the table. And then when we talk about expanding public services, to make sure that every part of our district and all of our communities are taken care of, that they have a seat at the table so we understand what issues they're going through, and just make sure they're heard, address their problems, because we're all Americans here. We're all part of the same community. We're all part of the same society, and we're only doing as well as the worst among us, and by which I mean the worst off among us. And if we let a community just suffer at the hands of law enforcement especially, or any authority figure, then we're not doing any of us any favors, and we have to address that. I think the same thing can be said for the LGBTQ community. I know that violence against trans women and trans people in general is a big problem. So we need to do what we can to make sure they're heard, increase public awareness of their issues and what they're going through and why it's difficult. And they're Americans like you and me. We all are. There's no reason we should treat anybody with any level of hate or disregard when we're all just trying to get by in our own way.
Yeah, that's great. We'll switch gears a little bit here and turn it back towards you a little bit to give you an opportunity. What experience, leadership, life traits, what things have happened that you feel would set you apart from your opponent?
Well, I will, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a physicist, I'm a scientist. The only thing I ever wanted to do with my life was be a scientist. The fact that I'm running for office is not a path I or anyone in my family could have ever seen coming. It's just like I said, when you get to a certain point, you gotta say, if I can make a difference, I have to try. It's like a patriotic duty, if you want to really make it sound more noble than it is, I guess. But I think that there's a lot that can be said about a scientist running for office, and we don't have many. I think off the top of my head, I can think of two. We have a physicist in Illinois, and I think there's a mathematician or a scientist out in Oregon. But the point is, we have a very different set of skills than, say, an entrepreneur or a lawyer, which is what most of Congress is. So my tagline for my campaign is complex problems and intelligent solutions. My day job, I'm in aerospace. I handle, without giving too much away, if you're talking, let's say you're talking about a rocket that you're trying to launch to go to the moon or Mars or whatever. There's a lot of forces at play when a rocket launches. How do you keep the rocket from shaking apart? How do you make sure it separates at the right points during the ascent? How do you make sure that the payload remains secure, that the astronauts on board are safe? These are all problems that have to be dealt with at some point on that I guess you could say, production line. And the skills you take in solving problems like that are very different than the skills you take to say, how do I make this business profitable? Mm-hmm. And especially in a pandemic, which is a public health crisis, which is rooted in science, I think it pays to have people on staff, in this case in Congress, that are capable of reading the research, understanding what it means, understanding the science behind it, and interpreting it for their colleagues, which I would be happy to do. But I think that that's really the key difference between me and my opponent, who is a former football player, and I think he has a business degree now. But when I was getting my master's in physics, one of my advisors would tell me that when you're taking these classes, you may be taking quantum mechanics or quantum optics or general relativity or whatever, but what you're really doing is learning critical thinking and how to solve problems. So when people ask you about your degree in physics, you tell them it's also a degree in critical thinking. And I think that a lot of us who are unsatisfied with the government at the moment could say they could use some critical thinking.
Oh, great. Thank you. Now that we're speaking with Aaron Godfrey, the candidate for the Ohio 16th Congressional District. I appreciate the time you took answering my questions, but I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to talk directly to the voters. So I will turn the mic over to you, and you can talk directly to them.
All right, thank you. So again, thank you for having me. Again, my name is Aaron Paul Godfrey. That's how I'll appear on the ballot, at least. I'm running for the 16th Congressional District here in Ohio, which does include a good chunk of Medina County, including Medina proper. There's a lot of reasons I'm running, but ultimately, I want the government that's accountable to the people. I like to say I'm no different than anyone that might be watching this. I'm no different from people who are just getting up, going to work to put food on their tables and make sure their kids get a good education. We need a voice in the government. Right now, it doesn't represent us. Ohio's been robbed of its voice by gerrymandering for a very long time. And if there's a year we can make a difference, it's this year. And I'm not running out of any notoriety. I have a career outside of running for office. And honestly, if I get elected to one term, but I help pass a bill that will make healthcare more affordable, that will make healthcare more accessible, and then I lose the next election because of that vote, okay, I'll go back to aerospace and I'll live happily ever after, knowing that at least I did something with my time. I'm just trying to make a difference. I'm trying to do the right thing here, and I just think that if we had more people in the government who were truly representative of the population, not millionaires, not businessmen, not lawyers, I think we'd be in a better position. And that's what I'm trying to bring to the office. I'm trying to bring accountability, representation, real representation, not just an empty suit. And I hope you can see that. And if you have any questions, I'm always accessible online. You can find me on Facebook at Godfrey for Congress, my website, godfreyforcongress.com. And you can always email me, Aaron at godfreyforcongress.com, and I will answer any question you have myself. I am an open book. I'm not doing this for any reason other than to try to represent you and try to be honest and direct with you, the people who are watching this, and the people across the 16th District.
All right, thank you. Again, Aaron Godfrey, the candidate for the 16th Congressional District. And usually I always like to wrap up with a nice handshake and wish you the best of luck. So I guess I did a little air elbow now for this one. And I wish you the best of luck this November.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.